Hello and welcome to the fifth lecture of Unit 4. This is the last lecture of this unit. We will be looking at the Declaration of Independence and, what it says, what we're talking about, where we go from here. So, how we're going to be looking at how this rebellion leads to a revolution. We are picking up the story here with the British have retreated all the way back to Boston. They are surrounded by 15,000 militiamen, and the Americans have now come up with a plan to take the city from the British. If we look at this map, you have the British are in this area right here that I've circled, and then the Americans are going to be posted up across the harbor in Charleston on two hills, which we'll get to in a little bit. But they are up on the high ground, and that is part of their plan. The Americans are going to capture a British fort and then drag cannons back to Boston and then attack Boston with the cannons. So they choose Britain's Fort Ticonderoga, they capture the fort, and now they have the cannons, but now they have to get the cannons and drag them all the way back to Boston through the woods, through the forest, which is going to take a pretty long time, so we're going to let them do that. So just keep that in the back of your head. They're dragging their cannons through the woods. They'll catch up with us in a little while. On the same day as the attack on Fort Ticonderoga, the Second Continental Congress, which is just like the First Continental Congress, except they're going to do some different things, was meeting in Philadelphia. This Second Continental Congress would be America's government during the war. They agree to create a Continental Army and choose George Washington to lead it. They are wanting to create this big army that everyone will put money into and people into, and have sort of a better organized force instead of having individual militias in each colony. You're going to have one larger army, and it's going to be under the direction of George Washington. So back to Boston. We're still waiting on our people to get over here from Fort Ticonderoga to get us those cannons. The militiamen were positioned on two hills across from Boston in Charleston, Bunker Hill and Breed's Hill. The Americans are in a position of power right now. They have the high ground, and the British are worried about this, and they decide to attack them. So this picture over here is kind of the British storming up Bunker Hill and attacking the colonists up here at the top. The British stormed up Bunker Hill, and an intense battle broke out. One of the famous lines from this is Colonel Prescott says, "Don't fire until you see the whites of their eyes." The British win, but at a very high price. If you think about a hill, okay, so you have the Americans up here and you have the British down here. So let's put this in different terms. Let's say that you have 10 people up here at the top of this hill, and then you have 10 friends down here, and you're having a snowball fight. Now, when you throw a snowball down here, even at this trajectory, it's going to get to them. But if they throw it at that same angle, it's going to just go right into the side of the mountain or the hill. So you can hit them before they can hit you. That's basically what I'm saying. But that's okay for a little while. But eventually, if these people down here have, 10,000 people, and you only have, 10, they're going to eventually be able to get up this hill, and you're not going to be able to hit them with as many snowballs. So that's going to happen, but that's going to take a long time for that to happen. So as these people are marching up and getting hit by snowballs, they are losing a whole bunch of people, and you're not losing as many. But eventually, you're going to have to be forced back. You're going to lose some people, and that's what happens to the Americans. So we have the British lose 1,000 soldiers, and the colonists only lose 400. And the colonists had held their own. They had, put up a pretty good fight. They only lose 400 people, and that gives them a lot of confidence. At this time, most people hoped things would end peacefully. They're thinking, oh, this is just a little uprising, a little rebellion. We'll show them that we mean business, and the British will decide that they don't want to fight, and everything will go back to normal. That's what a rebellion is. We're fighting to get something, from the current government to go back to normal. In 1775, Congress wrote the Olive Branch Petition. The olive branch is like a symbol of peace. This document asked the king to restore peace between the colonies and Britain, but the king rejects it. And he says that once the colonists get a taste of what the British could do to the colonists, that they would give up. They wouldn't fight because, the British were just going to beat them so badly. The colonists believed that they were equal to these British troops, but as we've talked about, the British troops are more organized, they're well trained, they have better equipment, and they are not equal to the colonists. The colonists are unequal, but the colonists still believe that they are equal, but George Washington knows that this is not true, so he needs to get them together and try to train them. So he arrives at a fort near Boston and starts training troops. He planned an attack on Quebec, which is a stronghold of the British in Canada, and hoped that the Canadian colonists would get on the side of the American colonists, but that doesn't really happen quite how he plans it out, and after several months the colonists lost the battle in Quebec. So we go back to British. The British are trapped in Boston, and finally our friends that are dragging the cannons through the woods get back and arrive in Boston, and now we position those cannons on hills overlooking Boston, and just like we could throw snowballs farther when we're up on top of a hill, we can shoot cannonballs farther when we're on top of a hill, and that means that we can be farther away from the British, so they can't hit us, but we can hit them. So we are now in an immense position of power, and the British know it, and on March 17th, 1776, the British leave Boston, and Boston now belongs to the Americans. Most Americans are still hoping at this point to avoid a total break from Britain, and just kind of keep this at a rebellion, but now a pamphlet entitled Common Sense, written by Thomas Paine, convinced many Americans it was time to fight, which brings this to a revolution. They want to fight. Common Sense says that America should follow its own destiny. So in a rebellion, we're just going to change things about how the government's working, but in a revolution, we're completely changing everything, maybe even setting up our own new government. That's Thomas Paine and his document Common Sense. In June 1776, Congress was discussing, the Second Continental Congress was discussing an idea that would end all political connection between the colonies and Britain, and that is all about the Declaration of Independence. They appoint a committee to write this declaration, and the committee chooses Thomas Jefferson, who that is a picture of right there. The committee includes Ben Franklin, John Adams, Roger Sherman, and Thomas Jefferson. Jefferson is chosen to write this document because he is a great writer and he is from Virginia. And they choose him because without Virginia, the independence movement would not succeed, because Virginia is a large colony, has a lot of people, has a lot of money, and you need a lot of money, you need a lot of people in order to win a war. So they're saying, oh look, Thomas Jefferson, he's from Virginia, he likes this, you should like it too. So back our independence movement. On July 4th, 1776, which is Independence Day, Congress approved the document and the members of Congress signed it, thus declaring our independence. And Jefferson has based his ideas in the Declaration on John Locke's ideas. If we remember back to John Locke, he's saying, during the Enlightenment, he is saying things like people have natural rights like life, liberty, and property. Well, in the Declaration of Independence, Thomas Jefferson says people have unalienable rights, which means rights that can't be taken away, to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And then he also goes on to say, just like John Locke says, that if a government isn't protecting those rights, it's the right of the people to get rid, abolish, change, throw out the current government. So that's what's going to happen. That's what they're saying. Here's this Declaration of Independence. We want to break away. We want to fight you. We don't want to be a part of your nation anymore. We're going to be our own. And that's a pretty intense document to be writing to the king. You know, we hate you. We want to break away from you, and we're better than you. If the war was lost, most of the men in Congress would be hanged for treason, going against their country, going against Britain. And America had declared its independence, but now they just had to win the war. So in this unit we have seen what conflicts bring the colonists to be very angry at the British, and then how we start to break away. And we are now to the point where we are going to fight this war. And that is what the next unit will all be about, the inner workings of the war, the outcome. And we'll just have our fingers crossed for those Americans, see if we can pull it out, see if we can win against the British. I don't know. You just never know. All right. I will see you in Unit 5.